does it mean to you to be a filmmaker?
To be a filmmaker is to be a storyteller, number one, and this has been going on since people were huddled around fires, thousands of years ago. So to be a filmmaker can be part responsibility if you're doing a movie with a social theme to it, or it can be pure entertainment, or it can be a variety of both. So as a filmmaker, it's just an obsession, really. It's something I've been doing since I was 13 years old. So it's been over 50 years of trying to tell stories to, I guess, entertain myself first, and then to also hopefully get it in front of as many people as possible to see your story. So as a filmmaker, I love all the steps of making a film. I started as a musician, playing piano and flute, and so I wanted to kind of continue on with music. When I was 13, I started making films in the backyard and haven't looked back since then. There's something about it that was kind of a magic process in a way, to be able to get a little story, even if it's 3 minutes when you first start, get a little story and show it to your family and friends. And then, you start winning awards, and it becomes a lifestyle. It's become an obsession. And as I was mentioning before, I think most filmmakers are obsessed people. You have to be to get through a film, because it takes a lot of your life, a lot of your life energy. You bring together all of your skills, be it with music, with photography, with the editing, with the actors, and certainly with the story. And if that coalesces into something that you've achieved something maybe beyond yourself, which is an exciting thought, something more than what you could just do individually, especially when you're making a film with a team. When you put all those pieces together, you can make something so much more extraordinary than you could probably on your own. So I find that to be an exciting process.
Did you ever get the, Marlin, I like you, but you got to get a good job with a pension. And I need you to, like a scene from The Graduate,
yes.
The plastics. Or
That's right, I love that. Yeah, that's a very good moment to talk about. I think my parents never really understood why I wanted to do it. My father was a government worker, and so yes, he was saying, what are you doing? I don't understand, What are you doing, doing these little films? You should really get a job, get something that is a pension, like you're saying, a 9-to-5 job. And I tried that when I was very, very young in my teens, but I would get fired immediately. I was never someone that could actually follow the rules too well. And so I was let go from dishwasher jobs or busboy jobs, and it just never was a good fit for me. So I've been very fortunate since I was about 20 to be able to continue making films all the way till now, 66. So yeah.
you had made a promise to yourself, I believe, at the beginning of your career, that you wanted to make movies that you were proud of.
Yes, that is critical to me. I don't know why I felt this way, but since I was, as I said, 20, 21, started getting into this more seriously, making money at films, I always wanted to feel that I could take a great deal of pride in each film that I would make. I guess I never wanted to be able to stand in front of a group of people, friends or family, and say, oh, well, this didn't work out too well because this person was sponsoring it. I don't really believe in this product, or whatever it is. I wanted to always be able to stand there and say, I just am very proud of this film, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do, making this. And I've been very fortunate to be able to continue honoring that vow, that promise to myself, to be proud of your work, to be able to show it to family and friends without any apologies, not backtracking in any way and saying, well, if I would have just had more money, or, those excuses. We always want more money for our films. We always know how we could spend more money. But you just have to, at a certain point, you have to stop your pre-production and just get into it and make your film, because it can take forever if you wanted to develop a film. You could spend years developing a film. But for me, I'm a little bit anxious and I want to always create at least one movie each year. So that's my goal now, is 10 movies in 10 years. And so we're on our way on that already with 3.
I discovered this brilliant YouTube video the other day, and the title was Why Society Hates Creative People and What to Do About It. Part of the reason was that, I guess, the narrator said that most societies equate new with bad, and that scares people. Also, too, that the bottom line is all that matters, and that creatives are often rebels who have nothing left to lose. And that's often
That's
when
true.
they do their best work. I was just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, creatives are rebels, that's for sure. It's always been that way throughout history. Is just even consider Impressionist painters, when they first became active in the 1870s, 1880s, they were considered complete rebels. They went against the grain of all of the classical paintings, and yet their paintings now are some of the most, of course, valuable and most popular to people throughout the world. Why is that? They were ahead of their time, they shocked people at their time, and that's what a lot of artists do say, is that their goal is to mix things up, to be troublemakers, to be the tricksters, to always have break the rules. Most artists are definitely rule breakers. They don't often respect authority very much, obviously. And so, yes, in other cultures, it's not quite as easy to do that. Like in China, for example, you would get stamped down if you do something too dramatic or too revolutionary or against authority. They would definitely stop you from doing something too ahead of its time, if you will, or criticizing authority, especially. And that can be the case in many countries, in Islamic countries as well. You can't necessarily represent the human form at all. So that's why their expression of art is especially in geometric shapes and the arabesque that you see in the mosques. And that's why I love Islamic architecture and design, is because of that reason. They focus more of their creativity away from the representation of human form into their architectural, geometric, swirling patterns, arabesque designs and colors and tiles. And it's incredibly beautiful, but very different, because you can't be a free artist in a lot of conservative Islamic societies. You will get stamped down before that. So for me, I guess I'm a natural rebel. I definitely have always questioned authority. I was old enough to kind of go through the edge of the late 60s and so on, where people were really expressing themselves, and of course the anti-Vietnam protests and so on. And so for me, I've always admired artists like Fellini and Bertolucci and Truffaut, and so many different European filmmakers have really excited me when I was young. And of course, then on contrast, David Lean doing Lawrence of Arabia. Now that's really such a benchmark that could never be repeated. Probably the best film ever made without the aid of computers. Undoubtedly, I think it is. So that inspired me. And as a filmmaker, I don't really consider myself an artist, which is interesting. I always think of artists as being painters, poets, things like that. But for me, filmmaking is, I suppose, I am an artist in that sense, but I find it so much more of a collaborative work, because you're dealing with technical things, the cameras, the sound, the crew and actors are involved. There's so many different elements to make a movie that it's hard to kind of consider yourself the auteur, the artist person. I'm more of an organizer, it feels like. When you're producing and directing, you're organizing amazingly talented people to come together in one amazing location shoot somewhere in the world and somehow, again, coalesce all of their energy and skills to make something exceptional that they can also hopefully be very proud of as well.
Well, just on a side note, I believe you were part of a film that was about Salvador Dali, his
Yes.
DNA, which I know there's a whole world of people that do these fakes, and they're like these savants and can recreate them.
Oh yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh no, so do you ever see any parallels between yourself and a particular artist?
Oh, that's a good question. A parallel between myself and an artist. It just seems that every artist definitely is someone very unique and individual, their own stamp. So I can't really think of one particular artist that I would be closest to. Although I respect Dali tremendously, he's very controversial for a lot of people because some of his surrealistic art had some very unpleasant looking imagery, right? Sometimes even people with parts of their bodies separated from, but he was the last great master painter because he was such a disciplined painter and craftsperson. He just would get down to one camel hair strand of a brush sometimes to get into the details of his paintings. He could paint incredibly large canvases as well as smaller ones as well. So he was quite diverse in his different ways he expressed his art, painted his art, from surrealism to things that were actually even Christian sponsored. He often would take commissions, and that's what separated him from the surrealist school. Was he got criticized for selling out. The Dali dollars was a famous quote. But I really love researching Dali, and I love researching any artist to make a film about them, a documentary about them, because you learn so much and get inspired by what the collision of inspiration they would have that goes into each painting, what they're trying to juxtapose regarding the meaning of melted cheese or clocks and so on to represent it melted cheese. It was fascinating, the descriptions that we learned about what inspired many of his paintings. So yeah, I was inspired by Dali when we were doing the documentary, and there's other artists we've done work with as well that were quite different. But we also had done documentaries about topics ranging from Columbus, which is a very controversial subject, as well as Knights Templar and their treasures and their stories, and Captain Kidd's treasure in Madagascar. There's all kinds of things that we love to do documentaries, and that's been my focus over 45 years, as doing about 100 and some documentaries and travel adventure shows.
Do you feel more alive with a camera in your hands?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't remember the actual person who said this, but it's been said that a camera person doesn't feel quite alive until they actually are shooting that film, until they have that camera in front of their eyes. And that they feel like part of their life is being wasted if they're not actually actively producing a film. And that is a very interesting statement to make. I mean, certainly you'd be missing a lot of life if you felt that way, because I do think that a lot of filmmaking actually is the research that goes into the film itself, the pre-production, the development. But for me, my career has been largely based behind the camera. I've been able to make a living mostly by being behind the camera, by filming, by shooting. I think I've dealt with 20 different formats, from 35 millimeter film to 16 to 1-inch videotape to 3/4-inch film tape to beta. It's gone on and on through the digital realms, all the way to what it is now over these decades. So I felt that I'm always out there trying to get another film made somewhere in the world. There's usually 10 different projects that simultaneously I'm trying to run, because you never know for sure as a filmmaker which of your next films will get completely greenlit and funded. So it's wise to have several different things on the different platters on cooking away, and so that when you do finally get a green light from a financier, an investor, all the actors, everything comes together for your film, you can move quickly. So it's wise to have several things right there handy to lift off the table and say, okay, we're ready to do this right now. We're ready to do that. Several scripts ready to go. So I'm always in preparation, sometimes shooting, of course, and then editing. So you get there's never a moment when you can be bored as a filmmaker, never a second, because you're always involved with these different steps of development, of the actual shooting, the editing, and then of course, the forgotten part by a lot of filmmakers is the marketing and distribution concentration. Because as I think you've heard with many filmmakers that you've interviewed, about 60% of your work is done when you finish your film. There's still another 40% or so getting the marketing done, getting distribution accomplished to your satisfaction. And I think most filmmakers feel uniformly they never get enough eyes on their work. They always feel like they wish there were more people out in the world that could see their work. I can't even remember a filmmaker I've ever met that has been satisfied with the scope of the distribution of their work.
We talked about having many films sort of in the fire at one time. Do you see with newer filmmakers, or maybe you were possibly there yourself in the beginning, that they were precious about one movie and they never moved on, almost like a bad relationship or a good relationship, but they just kind of kept, that was like their stamp on the world and they never moved beyond it?
Yeah, that is interesting. As we mentioned earlier, filmmakers can become unhealthy in their obsession with one particular film because it can be to the detriment of the health of themselves or maybe their relationships. It can destroy relationships. They can become obsessed with one piece of work that they need to tell a story of, it, either their personal story or a story they've developed about somebody they know, or based on a true experience, whatever it is. And for me, I think that it's best not to try to become so obsessed with one particular project because it may not get done. That's the key thing. It may not ever get produced. So you have to have, I think, several things developing simultaneously. And also, I think it's very critical too, not to think in terms of making a masterpiece, you know, your magnum opus. Don't think about doing that because it can be a huge hindrance regarding your progress in your filmmaking career. It's best to love what you're doing. There's no question. You have to be in love with your project if it's a personal film. Now, if it's a commercial piece of work, it's different. You know, you're doing it for a client perhaps. But if it's your own personal film that you're doing, and I think you have to be in love with it, but you don't, the topic, but you don't want to become, let it own your life. You don't want it to obsess you completely, so you become, if it doesn't happen, then you can become extremely depressed and may not continue with your film. There's a lot of people that only make one feature film. It's a one and done situation, you know, because it took too much out of their lives, out of their souls, out of their health, out of their finances. You have to look at filmmaking from a business point of view as well as art. So that's where it's maybe a little different from the other arts. A painter can just get out a piece of canvas and some paints. It doesn't cost a lot of money, right? And you can just start working alone and you can make something out of that, out of thin air in a way. A writer can do that as well. But usually for a filmmaker, it involves so many moving pieces that you have to be a circus master as well as an artist and a business person to pull it off. And I've been lucky to do that for 40-some years, to make a life of it, to make enough money to keep doing that without doing some other jobs, which is, I'm very, very happy about that and feel very fortunate in that way.
Do you think, though, going back to this video I talked about where,
Yeah.
quote, why society hates creative people, does an artist have to really be at a point where they have nothing left to lose and that's their most creative? Or can they actually be somewhere in the middle and there's a healthy balance?
Yeah, that's good. There's 2 or 3 questions that are good questions right there. I think sometimes I've heard it said that a lot of critics or viewers sometimes consider the first major work a filmmaker does as being their best. Which is an interesting commentary. It's possible that's true in the sense that it was the thing that the filmmaker was most in love with, that believed in the most thoroughly, and they put the most amount of their heart into, is usually their first film. So there's something to be said for that. But I think it's also important to, if you're a young filmmaker, to think in terms of the long run of your possible film career, and not to just be a fast 100-meter dash person, but think in terms of it as a marathon, or a longer race over decades. How do you want to design your life is very critical when you're getting started as a filmmaker, and it's sometimes is completely overlooked. Usually when you're young, you just go from one exciting project to the next without necessarily having a big plan or a good design ahead. But I think it's wise to think in terms of, number one, especially, unless you're just doing it for $100 or $1,000, you have to think in terms of, where is this going to be shown? Who is your audience? Why would anybody want to ever see your film? Is the first question every filmmaker needs to ask. Why, with all the films out there, all the different media, all the different YouTube clips, why would anyone ever want to watch your work? And that is such a hard question to ask sometimes. You may not have an answer right away for that. So that's when I talk to people, young people, about making films, I often like to ask them, what are you in love with? What can you not resist researching or doing? A lot of, as I said before, research should go into the making of a film, because I think, again, pre-production will determine often the success of your movie. How well it's prepared, how well it's researched, what have you done to set the table before you have your dinner? It's very important to think in terms of how you're going to if you're going to make a film, you have to decide if you want to be, I think, a feature filmmaker, or you can do a documentary filmmaker career, or perhaps short films. Short films are very difficult, though, to make money with. They're often a teaser for a longer form movie, Although there are so many beautiful short films made, tremendous there's Oscars given for short films. But the point is, it's very difficult to make money commercially, sell those. Usually they have to be put together as an anthology of short films, in a way, at a festival or at a theater. So I find that short films are a great way to start, if you would like, because they can be inexpensive to do. But if you want to design a career as a filmmaker, I think you might as well start thinking in the long form right away, in a sense, because ultimately that's where you're probably going to make enough money to sustain your life as a career, as doing long form stories.
If it's true that there are 1,000 ways to die in the Amazon, metaphorically, are there 1,000 ways a film career can die, or that your film can die, metaphorically?
Yeah, metaphorically, yes. It's good. Having worked in the Amazon, I definitely have mentioned the idea that there are 1,000 ways any of us could die in the Amazon. You just walk away from the river 100 yards, and then you can become lost, and then you'll never be seen again. So, and then the creatures will come for you. But for a filmmaker, someone said, making films is like parachuting. If the parachute doesn't open, you're going to die. It's almost like if you film the big effort that you've done to create a movie, if it doesn't work, you can die. It's theoretically that's possible, but that's why you always want to have not throw everything into any one film. It's just such a dangerous thing to be able to put all of your money and resources or your mortgage into a film. It's not a good idea at all. I did that once. I have lost a home due to investing too much in a movie. And it's been a big lesson, It wasn't the only reason why I lost the home, but it was a second mortgage situation. You take out too much money if you don't have any other investors involved. It is too high of a risk, too high of a price to pay. So I do think there are, 100 ways to kind of go away or die as a filmmaker, I suppose. It's that combination of elements, as I mentioned before. You have to have, I think, the innate skills and talents to do a movie. That's one of the things that's kind of missing a bit today, is some of the craft is gone in filmmaking for a lot of young people. Not to criticize anyone, but the gear has become so good and so high resolution and so many auto features in the equipment that you can take an iPhone 14 or 15 and go out and you can literally make a movie with an iPhone of that kind of quality, because it's 6K quality, 8K quality. It's not so much now the gear that is a test of a good filmmaker, because I think anyone can get the gear together between themselves and their friends, a small investment of a couple $1,000, $3,000, something like that. You can get the basic gear to make a movie. So there's never a reason to fail because of the equipment anymore. When I was first starting out, it would take at least $50,000, $60,000 of cash to buy the equipment to get started, you see. And then the film itself would be so much money per second. You know, I used to count the seconds when I was shooting film, because I knew every second would equal a certain amount of money. You know, and you'd shoot 10 seconds, you go, oh God, that's probably $20 right there I just shot. So there's like a taxi meter running when I used to shoot film. That is just not the case anymore. So you can shoot hours and hours of media, digital media, and that's not a problem whatsoever. Just keep your batteries charged and keep shooting. So it's never the gear. There are plenty of other ways to fail or to die as a filmmaker. The other one is one is if you just don't have a very compelling story to tell. And for me, with the travels I've done around the world over all these decades, there's so many dozens of stories I'd love to tell in these different countries. So it's not a lack for me of good stories I think I could tell. It really comes down to financing these different stories now and getting the proper financial backing to be able to do the movies I want to do. But for someone who's younger and hasn't had a lot of great life experiences, that's another way that a film can fail, is it's just the story just isn't compelling or interesting or kind of original enough to tell, because again, you're asking that question, who wants to see my movie besides your mom and your dad and your family and friends? They would watch it, but you got to think in terms of the general public. Why would they want to watch your story? And you have to ask those tough questions, and sometimes you can't answer those. Some filmmakers can't answer. They don't even know what the character wants necessarily, the hero. And that's another way to have a film fail, is not being able to answer what your protagonist really wants badly in that story. If they're just a mumblecore film, people chatting about their lives or their jealousies of a lover from a friend or something like that, it just isn't enough, I don't think, to tell a good story. Always dig in deeper as a filmmaker, a younger one, to find out who around you has a very compelling story. It doesn't necessarily have to be your own. You can adapt it from somebody else's story, but just make it something that you can tell people rather quickly what the story is and capture their attention where they want to know more. If you see them nodding off or getting diverted or checking their phones or something, you know you've lost it. You can never make a movie based on something where you've lost that person within 10 seconds of telling your story. They're already looking at their social media or something. So that's another way you could fail as a filmmaker, not having the right story.
Sure. I mean, in this day and age, so many people I see, adults, have a hard time staying off their phones at the theater, which is, it's kind of its own sickness, you know.
Isn't that something?
Especially when you're paying so much for a ticket and it's such an amazing experience. Why ruin it by checking social media? But even with gadgets today, I think you've mentioned before that sound is sometimes an issue. So it can look cinematic, but sound is so crucial. And
yes, thanks for mentioning that. So let's just say you have a film that you're really proud of, and you just did it for $1,000 and with your friends, and you put it together, and you think it's a wonderful film. Then you show it to a distributor, and one of the things where you can fail right away is they'll see immediately if the visual is strong enough, obviously, if your camera skills are good enough. The second one, and maybe even more important, is audio quality. Often people just don't have the right microphones when they're doing a film or a movie. They just don't get the microphones tight enough to the source of the sound, to the voice. And so you have to use just a really good boom mic, have a boom operator working that, or if you're using lav mics, you have to have those concealed properly, or just something. The microphones have to be close enough to your speakers, otherwise a distributor is going to say, forget that, I don't care how good your story is or how good your camera work is, maybe your actors are even very good. If that sound isn't there, it's going to exclude you from the club of being distributed effectively. So that's critical. Again, the story has to be good, the acting has to at least be competent, if not exceptional. The camera work obviously should be excellent, very good to excellent. And then the sound, of course, has to be top-notch. And boy, there's quality controls on every platform. Any good streaming platform will have a QC control, and that'll get kicked back in your face if the audio quality is not good enough. They won't accept it, and certainly distributors won't either. So it's another way to be very, very careful in your production. Don't skimp out don't cut your budget too tight to not get proper audio. Get a good sound mixer with you on the set.
If you are interested in storytelling, you may also like our new book, Story Questions, the sponsor of today's video. It's a story tool that offers you over 1,500 story questions that you can use as story prompts. It's packed with over 40 categories, so whether you are in the brainstorming stages, developing characters, dialogue, or rewriting, it can help you at every stage of the writing process. Think about this statement. Most powerful stories are just great answers to strong questions. We've linked up to story questions in the information section below. Now back to the interview. When did you have the idea that you wanted to be a travel filmmaker?
Yeah, travel and filmmaking. It's a combination of things that is eternally exciting. For some reason, it's been my fascination, dedication, obsession since I was 15. I first went to Europe with a band when I was in high school for 3 months, and that got me hooked on travel forever. So when you travel when you're young, especially, it'll stay a part of your life for the entire run of your life. So I knew that I wanted to see possibly every country in the world, if I could possibly do it. And then I also fell in love with filmmaking, so I wanted to combine those two, travel and filmmaking. And so, like many filmmakers that were in love with National Geographic shows, the BBC, I would collect all those National Geographics when I was young and dream about going to these places and making films in these great countries around the world. So I started doing that when right out of college, really. I was shooting, I got an assignment. I worked with Runner's World magazine when I was 20, 21, and I convinced them to send me to Europe, you see, for a year on assignment to cover different marathons and running events. And of course, while I was there, I was filming cheese makers of Switzerland, tapestry makers of Spain, just all violin makers in England. So I was interested right away when I was 20 to combine this filmmaking with the international travel life. And I'm not sure where the curiosity comes from because my mother's never been on a plane, ever. And my father was travel, but only during World War II. So that's not much in the sense of travel and culture. He was on a ship. But my brothers and sister were never that interested at all in travel. So I don't know why people are inspired to do certain things in their life versus their siblings or parents. But for me, it was always just a need to get out there and do National Geographic shows or documentaries. And almost every filmmaker I've ever run into wants to do a feature film at some point, a dramatic film, a movie. It's so romantic to do that in a sense when you're young. So I always wanted to do a feature film when I was very young, but I didn't have the capacity to do it. So I focused on travel adventure shows and documentaries since I was 20, essentially.
What type of temperament and mindset does a travel filmmaker have to have?
Yeah, a temperament for the ideal travel filmmaker. Number one, if you're going to dedicate your life to seeing the world, studying the world, traveling to these places around the planet, it's a lot like a sailor's life. You have to forego a lot of the things that a normal person that with a happy family at home and maybe a house, maybe that's not going to happen for you because it can be incredibly disruptive to maintain a relationship at home. If you're out there, in Zanzibar making a documentary or something, what happens to your partner at home? You get together as a couple so that you can literally be together, spend your life together, enjoying things together. But if you're so separate, that can drive a wedge between your relationships. And so it's very hard on families if you are a dedicated gypsy adventure filmmaker, unless you can somehow devise a way to travel with your partner, then that's ideal. Actually, then you take your home with you in that sense. But if you have family, if you have a kid or two kids or something, then that's almost impossible to do that as a filmmaker. So you have to make a deal with yourself to figure out what is the strongest pull, the biggest obsession in your life. If your need is to get out there and make films around the world, you have to make peace with that and not complain about that, not whine about it. You just have to go do that and follow your dream. And you just hope that the rest of your life can stay in parallel or synchronize with that as you go through your life. Sometimes it doesn't work. A lot of filmmakers that travel half the year in different countries of the world, it's almost impossible to maintain that relationship at home. So there's a lot of divorces in this case with a lot of people I know. Anyway, sometimes they just stay bachelors for all of their lives, if that's what they do. Filmmakers and photographers I know that travel for half the year or more.
And dealing with peer and family judgment, I'm sure is something, if you come back for Thanksgiving and
oh yeah,
when are you going to settle down, Marlin?
Yeah, that's always a big challenge, isn't it, when you get together at holidays with your family and each of the siblings and the parents are so different than you are, and you're the black sheep of the family, and it's so difficult to even find a common ground of things to talk about, topics, and so yeah, you definitely run into some interference at times from family members. But sometimes that's a bit of an inspiration. In a way, my father, even though I did like him very much, I'm sure I loved him, but it wasn't this hugging kind of relationship. He was, like I said, he didn't understand what I was doing, making films. He couldn't get his head wrapped around the concept of why are you making these films? How do you expect to make money? And so we never really got along too well, and so that was always a bit of friction. We just never had anything in common. But I looked at his life, though, as not a life necessarily well spent, because I think he just got caught up in raising a family with 4 kids, and he was an air traffic controller. He didn't have any particular passion with that job, and he would work odd shifts, night shifts, graveyard shifts. And then he got let go because of cataracts. And so I saw him as a very unsatisfied man in later life. And I just, as a reverse model, I thought that was probably good for me to see that, in the sense of I don't want to become the person just in the rocking chair watching television when you're 50 or 60 all of your life.
Way too young.
Yeah, it does. It was very unfortunate to see that. But
Yeah.
But again, just like any artist, filmmakers, if you're obsessed with it, if it's something that you have to do, that's what artists do. They will paint, they will write, they will do theater, they'll do dancing. Even if there isn't an immediate audience or immediate money for it, you are compelled to do it. And that's the same thing with a filmmaker. You better feel compelled and driven to do it. Otherwise, you better get out, and get out now, and choose another career. because there's too many obstacles to be successful for a life of filmmaking, money-making filmmaking. There's too many obstacles if you're not obsessed and strong and have those blinders on. That's the only way a film will get done, is if you or if your small little team are so driven to do it, it will fail if you do not keep your vision strong and clear. It will fail, there's no question. And especially if you're doing something you think is very, very good, you know, go ahead.
And also, things will fail and you have to maybe try again with something brand new.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and that's again the sense of, if you are too focused on just one film, one topic, one project, if you're too focused and too obsessed with it, let's hope it works out for you. If it doesn't, for some reason, it can kind of destroy your life, or you'll give up. So that's why again, it's wise to have a healthy set of other options for stories available and nearly ready to go. If that one project that is you think is your magnum opus, your masterpiece, if you're not able to do it this year, maybe you should take that second project and do it. You know, if it's a little bit easier to accomplish, to assemble the team to do that second movie instead of that masterpiece you wanted to do, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and pivot to these other projects, and don't just don't say this is the only thing or nothing. That's not really a good way to go. It's not healthy at all to have that plan. So,
what's the most beautiful place in the world?
Yeah, that's often people, when I travel around, do lectures around the country, people always ask, what is your most favorite country in the world, or what's the most beautiful place in the world? And usually I come back and say, it depends on 5 things that you might be looking for. One thing, are you looking for just raw, natural beauty, nature alone? I have an answer for that. If you're looking for culture, I can have an answer for that. If it's something to do with history, maybe, strictly history, I have a good answer for that. So for me, I think the most beautiful place in the world possibly is Bali. Bali, Indonesia is something like 13,000 islands to choose from in Indonesia, and Bali is one of 13,000 islands. So Indonesia is, you could spend your life going from one island to the next in Indonesia and seeing the differences and seeing different beauty. And so Bali is one that comes to mind for a lot of travelers right away. As far as the one country, besides the US, what we have in the US are these great range of national parks, which is almost unmatched, probably unmatched in the world as far as the variety of national parks that we have, state parks and national parks. So it's hard to exclude the US from raw beauty when you have Yosemite and places like that in Alaska as well. But other places that are extremely beautiful, of course, Thailand. The islands of Thailand are absolutely stunning, beautiful, beaches and tropical setting. And again, then you have the people, the culture, the Buddhist background, the cuisine. You have so many elements that are so much in the favor of Thailand, places like that. I love Southeast Asia generally because of their Buddhist background, as well as the beauty of the tropical scenery and the culture and the food. So you can pick out Vietnam and Thailand and even parts of Cambodia, Laos, some amazingly beautiful places to visit there. If you want raw nature, obviously the Amazon is almost unmatched in the world. It's got a great place names. I love place names of the world, exotic place names, what I call exotic place names, like Zanzibar, Kathmandu, the Amazon, Samarkand, Bukhara. These excite the imagination. That's partly why I also wanted to be a career documentary, travel adventure filmmaker, and feature filmmaker, is to actually go to these places that were on the maps that look so exciting just in their name alone. You may not even know anything about their culture, but the name was so exciting that you wanted to go there, And so, yeah, there's almost every country I can think of has something exceptional and worthwhile to go to that country to see and to experience. And then for history, raw history, the depth of it, the mystique of it, the fascination of ancient history. Of course, Egypt is almost impossible to beat, as we know. And China, of course, has such a long history and so many incredible monuments and temples and temples within the mountain scenery, just exceptional blending of archaeology and natural scenery. Machu Picchu in Peru, the most extraordinary archaeological site in nature in the world, absolutely. So you kind of pick and choose as you go around the world. And Antarctica, if you want just that stark, clean, crisp blue and whites and penguins and whales and research stations, it's an amazing experience if you can get to go to the Antarctic Peninsula and see all that. The lights so clean and so crisp, glistening. These icebergs, massive icebergs that you can sail by. It's astoundingly refreshing and beautiful, places like that.
You've been to over 150 countries?
Approximately 150, yes.
Do you ever have a fear of missing out? Is that part of what fuels you? You just want to see everything, every culture, every landscape?
Yeah, the compelling thing when I was young was for some reason, to go see every country in the world. There's about 200, and then there's plenty of territories and possessions and so on, but a couple of hundred countries, 200. So yeah, I've been very fortunate to have gone to about 150 so far, some of them many times, like India and Turkey and places like that, many, many times. But I think the compelling aspect of it, first off, we're just incredibly lucky, by the luck of the draw, to be able to actually even contemplate doing that in this country. I mean, there's so many places I go to around the world where people cannot get out of hardly the village that they're in or within 20 miles of where they live. They don't see anything beyond that. And so we just, by the luck of the draw, were able to be born in a society, a culture that allowed us to be able to go travel and see these places and learn. So yeah, 150 countries. I did originally want to go to all of them. Now I'm not so sure that I really do, because you know what, it really comes down to, I've met some people that have been to almost every country of the world, but I kind of feel like there's a point where travel bragging is excruciatingly boring to hear. It's very dangerous to start talking about your travel experiences with people, because it almost always sounds like you're bragging about it. And I really try to avoid that, because it's not the quantity, it's always the quality of the experience, wherever you are. If you just live in California all of your life, that's fine too, as long as you're happy with that and your life is rich and you feel satisfied. There's no complaint, there's no way you should be attacked for that. I do think that your curiosity should at least research other cultures and countries if you can't get there. At least try to see the documentaries and so on about these different countries and learn as much as you can. But if you don't get out, so be it. Like I said, my mom never got on a plane in her life, so it's such a contrast within your own family sometimes. But for me now, it's not so important to go to every country in the world, because I see that would be a stunt. It would almost be like, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to prove something and to brag on this extra level that you did that? I would be happy to do it if there were projects and I felt like it was worthwhile and I really felt compelled to do it. But there's some countries that are very, very risky to go to, and you may not actually survive very well. I've had a couple of friends have tried to go through a lot of countries in Central Africa, and I've been to some of them, but some they've gone to that are far more risky for a traveler because of different diseases, waterborne diseases and so on, or possibly crime issues, but every country has got crime issues. But some places now, I'm not so sure if I really want to risk, getting some sort of waterborne disease for the rest of my life or whatever it is, because a couple of people I know do have problems of recurring malaria or intestinal issues that they've picked up in some places. It's not funny that they picked up, and I just don't know if I really wanted to do that now. So I'm going to probably focus on the countries that I fell in love with in the decades before. And frankly, one of the biggest goals I have now is to just do a movie in about 10 or a dozen different countries where I had the most compelling, exciting, memorable travel experiences, and make a story within a dozen of those favorite countries that I worked in. And that's kind of what I'm doing now with these different films I've been occupying my time with, is to find or write a story, at least the first 15 or 20 pages of a script. If it's in Cuba, if it's in Tanzania, if it's in Turkey, or wherever it may be around the planet, write that story based on something that I personally went through, and then just magnify it with heighten the drama for the characters. So that's my goal right now.
Well, I don't get the sense you're bragging. I mean, you've been
Thanks.
feet on the ground, probably dealing with different situations that
Right.
were possibly unsavory. Any advice to filmmakers, whether they're from the U.S. or abroad, when going to a new area, that there's probably a level of respect, there's a way to behave, and maybe
Right.
it's different for each place?
Yeah, good. And that's one thing that I'm so happy to talk to filmmakers about, is if you wanted to do a film outside of the U.S., which is something that's all we do, is films outside of the U.S., how would you go about it? How do you get your feet wet in that culture? What's intimidating? What's the best way to approach people in these local cultures? How do you handle that? Well, let's say, for example, you wanted to go to Egypt and make a film, which we recently did. How do you even start doing the concept of that? Number one, the best thing that I've found as far as advice for anybody is to make sure you try to find a local fixer as quickly as you possibly can. A fixer can be often called a location manager or a unit production manager, somebody who is in that country. If it's in Egypt, it could be an Egyptologist that does tours. It could be somebody who's connected to the local Egyptian filmmaking community. Every country has filmmakers, virtually every one. And so you find right away online, you can find these people just by Googling certain location manager Egypt, location manager Thailand, and you start vetting those people, contact them, email them, find out what they've done before, what level they work on. For me, all of our movies are micro indie movies, because independent films in Hollywood at least are considered like 5 million to 30 million or something. It's in a range that 90% of filmmakers never get to. So I'd say about 95% of filmmakers work on budgets less than $500,000, sometimes even a vast majority under 100,000. So for us, the movies we've done thus far have been under $1 million, a couple of them under 500,000. And so we know the limitations of our budget, and let's just say that you wanted to now do a film in Egypt. So you would contact a location manager, find out the films they've done, what kind of money that they expect you to pay, and you come up with some sort of middle ground, but you don't set a deal here from the US. You really need to take a location scouting trip for sure ahead of production. So you don't want to just show up with your team of 10 people, 15, 20, 30 people in Egypt all of a sudden and just expect it to work out. It just won't work out well for you that way. So you take one of your other producers with you, go to Egypt, go to Cambodia, go to Thailand, wherever you're going to go, Brazil. Go ahead with your script and your story, and something you've done on Studio Binder, break it all down to figure out where your locations are going to be. And then find and meet with 2 or 3 candidates in that country that will be your fixer, your location manager. And then you select one of them and then proceed with unrolling what you want to do in that country with them. Because then you will find out about what you're going to find obstacles with authorities, either from the the Ministry of Information, the Ministry of Archaeology. There's all different ministries you might have to get permits from. Usually you do. Or you can try to go guerrilla style, which is always risky. We did that with one of our movies in Cambodia because the topic had a background story of the government takes a cut of the business from. So we knew if we actually went to the government and said, here's our script, we want to do a story of 4 Americans that run into conflict. That's not going to work. You're going to get escorted to the airport out of the country. Maybe even worse, if they catch you making that movie, they can maybe detain you, possibly in prison, slap charges on you that are unmerited. So we did that like we would do a documentary movie. See, if you do a documentary, a full-length documentary, you don't get permission of the government necessarily at all, because you want to be as objective and as true and honest and genuine as you can about that story in that country. So documentary filmmakers often don't get permission from these governments because they would stop you. So I kind of went in on the Cambodia movie that we did, a drama, without getting permission from the government. And that's very risky to do. We had to bribe a lot of people, from generals to the Cambodian mafia at the brothels, and lots of different people had to be bribed. And so you don't want to go into these countries with a faint heart. You know, you have to have a bit of courage to do this, and it's not for everybody, that's for sure. But for most filmmakers, you're going to go through the government. At least you'll try to get the government permission and pay the fees. Like for Egypt, like $70,000 to do even an indie movie there. They've had thousands of years of experience with visitors to Egypt, and they know how to extract what they need from everybody. I don't blame them. I'd probably do the same thing, you know. So bakshish culture, of course it is. But I don't mind that. We paid, over $10,000 of personal hand-to-hand permits, I would call them, spot bribes. A little bit of hand grease is the way a lot of the world actually operates outside of Western Europe and Japan and the US. It's usually a payment of some kind privately with people. And so if you're uncomfortable with that, like most Americans are, I am too to some degree, you work through a local fixer, a location manager, and you give them the amount of money each day, a certain amount of money, and you have to have complete trust in them, otherwise that won't work, of course. But if you completely trust them, and if you've done your vetting and find the right person, you give them a certain amount of money. Here's the $1,000 for today's bribes, and they will disperse that accordingly to the local people. And that way the money actually goes to the local people anyway versus the government in the central capital. And there's no trickle down there, you see. So it's exciting to do guerrilla film work, if you want to call it guerrilla filmmaking. It's micro indie filmmaking at its most exposed, in a sense, because you don't have a lot of safety nets to fall into if you're in somewhere in Zambia or something. You know, you don't have a lot of places to go to if it doesn't work out. So that's why you don't see a lot of filmmakers doing that. It just seems a little bit too risky or dangerous or insecure, and it's hard to get investors to do that. And even if you're going to Egypt, they would not even insure a lot of big movies in Egypt for a number of years because it was on the terrorist list. And so that's why a lot of big movies that Ridley Scott does and others, they shoot it in Morocco, which is a far more film-friendly country in that sense.
How do you know you can trust your fixer, and what happens if the price changes while you're there?
That's true. Yeah, it's always a matter of who you can trust in anything, in the U.S. or overseas. So when you're doing your scouting trip to an Egypt or Brazil or wherever you're going, that's why you want to meet at least 3 possible location managers or fixers. And meet at least 3 in person at a cafe or something. Sit down with them. Try to find out if you can get to know them a little bit as people. And people are generally pretty good at reading each other. If it's BS or if it's legitimate, if their heart seems to be, reads to you sincere, your body language, eye contact. There's different things will tell you generally if they are going to be trustworthy. Now, that's not a guarantee. There are no guarantees, but say you meet 3 different ones, you're going to definitely get a feeling which one might be more reliable. And then you also vet them a little bit online as well. If they've had other filmmakers work with them, or if they're a guide or Egyptologist or something, there's plenty of references that they can give you, and you can actually check with them. And so at the end of the day, you have to make that decision and go with it. And we are very lucky in every international location. I can think of very few. I mean, I've worked with, in places like working with a warlord in Afghanistan, Pakistan, dealing with the Taliban as well. And it's tricky. Everything now, then it becomes more life and death. It's not just losing money if you're making a film somewhere. Now you're really putting your lives in their hands, and so you definitely want to check out as much as you can ahead of time before you sign on for a month with somebody in a country. But yeah, there's been a lot of possibly very dangerous situations I've been in, with kidnapping threats and a knife, possible attacks and guns in my faces and things like that. It's something you just have to decide if that's what you want to do or not. That's why a lot of people don't want to get that kind of feeling of threat. Although I must say, having said all this, the international rule by far is hospitality. That's interesting to say because you hear a lot of negative things about so many countries. But I guarantee you, from experience in all these countries, that especially if you go with just yourself or you and your partner or something, you're going to run into an extremely high level of hospitality in these countries. It doesn't matter if it's in Africa, Asia, wherever you go to, Europe, South America. They sympathize with you immediately as a single traveler or with just 2 people. But especially if you're traveling on your own and you're trying to learn about them, they have a lot of sympathy for you because they think that they kind of feel sorry for you. They kind of go, where's your wife or husband? Where's your family? Why aren't they with you? Aren't you incredibly lonely? What happened? So there's so much more family connections around the world than often in the U.S. Family means a lot more in so many, most of the countries of the world than here. And so they always are concerned about your being separated from your family. And so they tend to invite you for dinner or maybe stay overnight even sometimes at their home, and they'll just give you everything they've got often. And it's very touching, actually. Very, very, sort of heartwarming to see that because there's so many things that are going wrong with the planet. And to see that there is so much hospitality on a one-to-one basis gives me some hope, against the odds.
How do people in other countries respond when they see your camera?
Well, when you show up in a village somewhere in a developing country, you are the circus coming to town. So immediately people will change their behavior from what they're doing, which is completely going against what you're hoping they would do. You want to, as you come in with a camera and you're doing a documentary, say, for example, I'll use that example of In the Shadow of Bin Laden. We'd go into villages in Pakistan and people would just stop what they're doing. If it's trading, if it's washing clothes, if it's whatever they're doing, they would just stare at you. And in India too, there. I love these people in India and Pakistan because they love movies, and especially in India. And they will just gather around you, big groups of them, and just look at you like this, their eyes just wide open, unblinking, and just going, waiting. You're making a movie, It's just, and so they love the idea of seeing a film being made. And so you have to decide now what are you going to do about that. Now, let's say you wanted to get some scenes of people unobserved in a way. How are you going to possibly do that when there's people everywhere looking and wondering what you're doing? Is there something went wrong here? Is there a big news event? Is there something happening in my village today? So it changes the the normal course of things in people's lives when you show up with this big camera, and especially if you have a sound person with a boom pole or something. It's the entertainment of the day for them. It breaks the routine for their day, and they just are just mesmerized, and it's a lot of fun for them. So what you have to do is eventually just stick around long enough in the market or wherever you are until they get a little bit tired of it. And you just sort of wait it out. You don't stare at each other for an hour, but you just go about, checking your gear or doing whatever. And eventually they will get tired of looking at you and just go about their normal activities again. And then you can maybe start talking to whoever you're interviewing, or you're getting some B-roll cutaways of the trading in the market or whatever it is, or the traffic going through town. But you just have to kind of be patient enough to let that novelty effect pass by their minds, and they go, well, they're not going away and they're not doing anything extraordinary, so I'm just going to go back to what I was doing. And I try to equate that with, let's say, an India team of filmmakers is just coming around your house and you're outside, whatever, cutting the, trimming the lawn or getting, whatever you're doing, maintenance-wise, and they're starting to film you. Why are you filming me cleaning the window here, or whatever it is? You kind of go, this is just bizarre. Why are you focusing on me at all? And a lot of times you go, I don't want to be filmed. So you have to be sensitive to that too. Obviously, we try to get permission from as many people that are absolutely in focus for more than a second or two. If people are just passing by in a marketplace, just walking by, you can kind of let that go in a lot of shows, travel documentaries, because you're not really focusing on one person long enough for them to theoretically sue you, because and people are not going to pursue this in other countries trying to sue you as a filmmaker. That could be the case in this country, for example. So I try not to invade the privacy of a person without asking ahead of time, and then getting, at least if I'm with a translator, getting something, just initial of something as a model release. And then other times you can film a scene, and then in post-production you can, as you know, kind of blur the edges of things to make it so that you don't have people looking at the camera as they're walking by in a market or wherever you may be on the street. So that's how it is, when you're going into these developing countries. In Europe, this is not really an issue, or Japan or other places like that, because they're so used to things, people photographing each other. Although you can run into trouble with people if you tend to focus in on, sometimes people can really tell, obviously, if you're zeroing in on them, they're going to rightly ask you, what are you doing? Do you have my permission to film me? So that happens more in Europe, in my experience, than in, say, developing countries.
How many times have you been arrested in another country?
Oh, yeah. Seems like in the so many countries I've been to where I've been arrested and detained, I think mainly it's been at least 15 times minimum I can remember being detained, arrested several times in holding pens. It's usually in communist countries and in Islamic countries, almost always detained or arrested. And so what happens is, obviously, if it's an Islamic country and you don't have necessarily the permits, if you're just doing a travel show or a very small-scale documentary, there's always somebody that's interested in coming up and extracting a little money from you. And sometimes it's just a novelty, and it doesn't bother me at all. But sometimes then people will come up, and it's a policeman or undercover cop or somebody. This happened in Cuba, where I was detained and arrested and taken in for questioning twice in one trip even. I've been there half a dozen times to Cuba. I love that country. It's just a deeply emotional experience to go to Cuba. It's so much for us to learn. But they're also very sensitive about embarrassing them. And that's usually the case when you're travel filmmaking person, often they're worried about you showing them in a bad or negative light. And they don't want to be embarrassed on the international stage by showing the poverty that may be there, or just the filth, the exposed garbage, or construction falling down, buildings falling down, whatever. They don't want to have that shown. And so cops will just suddenly appear and detain you and ask what you're doing. Do you have permits? And hopefully you'll have all that handy, or you have a fixer explaining what you're doing to them. If that doesn't work out, then you're kind of marched into a car or just marched down to the local station, and then they'll detain you for a while. What usually happens is the same thing I mentioned before, is they usually get bored with you after a while. If you don't pay money right away, it's this waiting game. Each other is trying to figure out who's going to kind of blink first. And because they don't really have a right to hold you and arrest you necessarily at all, because you weren't doing anything that offensive. It's just that they think they can extract a little money from you. It's an opportunistic moment for a minor official or a policeman. So that happened to us recently in Egypt. We were just doing a scouting trip, and I was filming with a fairly small camera, but in Egypt, a citizen can actually do a citizen's arrest on you, because the president has told them in a public announcement that any citizen who suspects a tourist of filming something that seems not of the archaeology sites or something that we'd be proud of, you can arrest them and take them down to a police station. That's on the books there, which is so bizarre to me. That just from a society like ours, that seems like it's not possible, but that did happen. And I was just filming in a clothing market, and some citizen came out of the crowd and said, started yelling and saying, "You can't shoot here." And then there's somehow we found a cop nearby. We went to a station, but then some plainclothes policemen from the intelligence came in to the station, and we explained that we're not embarrassing the country at all. We're just excited about this open market, and we wanted to show it from an educational point of view. And the guy was very understanding from the higher level government. But see, sometimes the local people get this sense of power that they can have you arrested, and they just take advantage of that possibility. It's just amazing sometimes the things you run into, and you just have to think on your feet and be ready for these things and not get too emotional about it. Stay calm, and that's the key. You never want to engage in any official in an arguing match at all. You just want to be as friendly as possible, and often just say that you're just trying to show the best side of their country. And that's what I have generally done for 4 decades, is often in the geography and travel shows I've done before the movies, is always showing the best of the country.
Have you ever had your film equipment stolen?
Yes. You have to be very, very careful, obviously, with your equipment when you're traveling to countries. It can be Europe, it could be South America, it can be Asia, Africa. You have to be extremely careful and not take for granted that you think things are safe. Even if you're at a cafe, we've had equipment stolen in Lisbon with equipment right next to us, having a nice dinner in a square there in Lisbon. And then after like a couple minutes or having some opening drinks or appetizers, the guy looks down and his gear is gone. Sometimes these people are extremely polished about how they can steal things from you. Usually it's a distraction occurs. Sometimes I've had it happen in South America, in Cusco and in Santiago as well, where people would either tap you on the shoulder over here and say, like they put a little sort of cream of some kind on your shoulder, like shaving cream on your shoulder, and say, "Oh, bird," they kind of point up to the sky, and like it just came out of the sky, and then their buddy is over here, picking your pocket or your bag. So it's always best for thieves, I've noticed around the world, to have distraction techniques. And so and they also look for certain types of tourists that are much more vulnerable, usually older tourists. And often Asian tourists are often picked out of the crowd too by thieves because they often think that the Asians are carrying more money for some reason versus credit cards or something, which is an interesting, probably cliche, not probably true, but for some reason they think they're easier targets, Asians often. In Europe, I've heard that many times actually. So yeah, equipment stealing is a fact of life you have to just be very wary of. In Africa too, and I was doing a film about the Rwanda mountain gorillas there, which is just one of these once-in-a-lifetime amazing encounters with these massive gorillas only 6 feet away from you that could tear your limbs off if they wanted to. But in the close-by city or town, there was a case where there was attempted theft there, which we had to chase after them. Another one was in Madagascar, where I had just had my arm up on the a car just kind of slowly going along a market street, and somebody just grabbed that watch and rips it off my hand, runs through the market. So I just get out of the car. I used to be a runner when I was younger, and just run after these people. It's like this cliche scene where you're jumping over fruit and vegetable stands, just trying to get to the thief. And then the nice thing about that theft is that the 3 other local men chased after him with me because they didn't want to be thought of as a culture that would be ripping tourists off and stuff. In Madagascar, you could actually have your arm chopped off or worse if you steal. So that the guy just threw the wash up and kept running, and just so anyway, things like that happen, but that can certainly happen in the U.S. and big cities too. But gear is always a worry when you're traveling. Security at night, sometimes if you leave it in your hotel room, you have to, there's things where you can actually get little alarms for doors and hang them on motion sensor type alarms, which are a wise idea. Or you can sometimes just have something to chain around something heavy. There's ways to kind of prevent that, or hopefully the management of wherever you're staying is legitimate and they're not in on the deal. So it's always something to watch out for. Insurance is usually a really good idea if you can get some insurance for your year before you travel out there in far-flung places of the planet.
Did you have any Argo moments where you were leaving at like the 11th hour and there were people chasing a plane
down the runway? Yeah. It's I found that's not so much the case of leaving. It has more to do with entering in a way, because the key I've always felt on these different international productions, if I can get through the customs and immigration and get out to the Jeep or get out to the transport and my guide, the film is in the bag. I already feel like the film will be successful, because it's so much of just getting through all these little hurdles to get into the country and to get your team together and so on. It's such a major feeling of accomplishment and satisfaction to actually just get outside the airport and through these officials, because sometimes you have to bribe some of the officials. If you don't have all the paperwork and all the carnets and all the permissions, then you sometimes even have to bribe people right there. And sometimes if you're going guerrilla style, they may hold back something. For example, it's illegal to take a drone into Egypt. No citizen can have a drone. You can't bring one in as a tourist even. They'll confiscate it. And so, because they're afraid that little mini bombs can be put on a drone and flown into something or another. So that's an example. Like, they'll just go over every piece of equipment in customs in a lot of countries and say, is this professional or is this amateur, is this personal? And so I just am so happy when we get through all those hurdles. But then, like I said, there's been times where, I've had, like in Pakistan, in the tribal zone there, my guide we were at a market, open market, sheep and camel market, and there are a lot of Taliban people nearby, because you can always tell because they have the black turbans and the black clothing and the big beards, of course. And he said, we got to get out of here immediately, because they are talking. He heard them talking about how they wanted to maybe kidnap me and detain us. I was just with one other person at that time. So we definitely got out of there quickly. So you have those experiences sometimes. Sometimes you're hit. The camera gets just hit, you know, like you're shooting a scene in one of these cities in the Middle East or somewhere like, again, Pakistan or a very conservative Islamic country. This is the case where you're not supposed to photograph people, theoretically. It's against the Quran, you know, to imitate the human form in any way. So I'd be in the middle of a lane in a market, you know, like a jewelry market lane or a produce lane or something, and people would just be coming by me with women in purdah and everything, and then suddenly somebody just jam the camera, you know, with their hand, and they'd just be on top of you yelling and stuff. You can't do this, and so yeah, it's a mixture of feeling like, yes, of course I shouldn't really be here doing this in your society, and yet you're trying to tell a story as well. You know, a documentary we did about In the Shadow of Bin Laden was the name of that documentary. So yeah, there's a lot of times where you just feel like, why am I doing this? You know, maybe get more life insurance next time, you know, with your take out more life insurance. But if you're, you know, partly it's adrenaline, partly it's just the curiosity of wanting to tell a story that maybe not that many other people are telling that story. And that's what's been a big drive for me, is so many people making stories, films in LA and around the US. I just felt like with my background, the best contributions of storytelling I can make is in other countries. From a point of view of American, which is sometimes we get into a lot of trouble overseas because of cultural misunderstanding on our part often. And that is always great storytelling material, is the collision of misunderstanding between our culture and another culture, and how we figure our way out of these troubles.
Sure, the confident Hollywood American.
Yeah.
That's maybe how you're seen, yeah.
Sometimes ugly American stories, there's lots of them out there, as we know, and you can run into all kinds of trouble if you are not alert and pay attention to the customs and cultures and religions and so on of these countries. And I mean, often Americans are described as being very, ignorant tourists perhaps, you know. Europeans tend to definitely critique Americans a lot, you know, about the way we travel and so on. But again, it depends. Every person's different. You know, if you go in with enough research and cultural sensitivity, you know, people usually are just really, really welcoming and open. So, you know, the thing is, we can never get fully into the minds of the person sitting next to us. We never know what they're really thinking deep down, or what their true passion is. Maybe they never share that until they go out there and do this. Then you see what they're obsessed with, and it's not for us to understand what the next person really is passionate about, per se. And that, for a filmmaker, that's actually the other thing I wanted to talk about, is the stories of what really only interests me in life about people, I guess, generally, is what they're passionate about. Because obviously we all have to go through our regular day, paying the bills, shopping, groceries, all that. Fine, great, you know, nice stories, right? No, it's about what you're passionate about, what you can't help yourself but do. That's what makes these stories fun, from documentaries that we do or the feature films, you know, just find out what that passion is, what they cannot prevent themselves from doing. That's usually a wonderful story right there. And almost everybody has some sort of story like that, what their passion is. That's the first question I like to ask.
You were part of a project entitled The Light Beyond?
Yeah, Light Beyond and Saved by the Light. There's a lot of lights involved with these near-death experience books. I was suggesting a title, Bud Light, but no, it's Saved by the Light, Light Beyond. Yeah, that's one part of my career has been involved with a partner of mine. Paul Perry is a best-selling writer, a New York Times best-selling writer of several books about near-death experiences. And there are millions of people in this country that firmly believe it's a fact of life, that People have these NDEs and they go beyond, they see the other side, go down the tunnel often and reunite with relatives, or sometimes see judgment figures that will judge their life. There's certain characteristics of a lot of near-death experiences that are the same, and sometimes between cultures as well, not just within the U.S. Similarities. So yeah, partner Paul Perry and I have done several documentaries about the near-death experiences, and it's a nice change of pace from the other shows that we do, historical documentaries or documentaries about artists, or the movies I've been doing, or the travel adventure shows that I do. So I'm always interested in just really good stories. And so these near-death experiencers always have really good stories because they have either had some sort of auto accident, or got hit by lightning, or they fell down the stairs and they were dead for 20 minutes, clinically dead, and then they come back and tell about how they were watching the operation room and they saw themselves on the table, and they could describe things that they wouldn't been able to see that perspective unless they were hovering from another place. So sometimes personally, I don't think that anything happens after we die. I think it's asking too much that something will happen. That's just my own point of view. I think it's just lights out. It's very similar to what happened before you were born. Can you remember that, for example? Now, I have no empirical proof about my beliefs. Other people feel like there's a spirit bank, a soul bank. There's a transportive system for your soul into a cosmic bank of some kind, or you're reincarnated. I mean, if you go to India, you're dealing with a culture, Hindus, that have a firm belief over millennia that you're reincarnated into another life form, depending on the karma, your dharma of the day, and the karma that you accumulated. You can come back in a certain form or another, you see. So, you don't want to start arguments with people. I have no interest in doing that. I'm just fascinated to learn from people and find the range of experiences and beliefs people have, not only in this country, but around the world. And that's what just makes life exciting, is learning these things and hearing these great stories. And you go, well, let's just do a recreation then of your near-death experience. One of them was Daniel Brinkley, who got hit by lightning, and it was a documented account. I mean, he was talking to his friend on a phone, and he got hit by lightning over the phone lines. It was so strong that his shoes stayed in the floor because the nails in his shoes, were bolted in the floor, and he hit the ceiling and then landed somewhere else in the room and taken to the hospital, 20 minutes clinically dead, wheeled off to a morgue under the sheet, and his friend came to say goodbye, and he saw a little breath moving on the sheet above his head. That's the only reason he wasn't thrown in the freezer. And he had remarkable tales to tell about these things he experienced, about how we just have a small life, almost like the size of a pinhead that we experience now. What he saw was fabulous beyond all that. And he saw a life review of all the things that he did badly to people, as well as good things, in a flash as he was dead. And then he was judged, and then he didn't want to come back. So a lot of people have these experiences that they don't want to come back, because the experiences are so strong and exciting on the other side, and then they're suddenly, now they're being resuscitated, and they come back into their bodies, and they're in pain, and it just changes them forever. These people are usually extremely optimistic people when they come back from an NDE. And they have no real fear of death at all. And so that's always just fascinating, just to document stories like that, no matter what I may personally believe. It's just fascinating to hear their vivid stories. And sometimes they actually go to work for hospice organizations, because they don't want to see anyone die alone, and they want to be helpful as much as they can to those people. So there's definitely some very good practical things that come out of that.
How much did you know about the topic before you partnered with the one author?
I didn't know anything really about it because it was never any of the books I would read. And then it was a work for hire in a sense, because he's a good friend. And I just wanted to make a film with Paul. And we started doing several, in fact. And so I didn't know much about it at all. So you learn as you go. And that's one of the great things about filmmaking. You get to step into other people's lives for a very concentrated, short amount of time and learn a great deal that you wouldn't normally learn if you had another job, for example. That's also what actors say too. They can also step into another person's life, and especially if they go method or something, and they can experience so many different ways of thinking and life and philosophies and manners. Or somebody who's doing something philanthropic, they can do that. And so that's always fascinating for actors, I know, certainly.
What has hearing about near-death experiences taught you about living?
Yes. From the documentaries we've done about near-death experiencers, what did they teach me about living? I think the main thing that comes to mind is I'm so impressed with the way they describe their own changes of their lives, how they look at death now, how they look at every day now. They're usually quite in the carpe diem sort of mode. They definitely try to live more for the day. They don't let small things get them down as much. They don't get as pissed off, upset, road ragey kind of things anymore. It really changes them. So through them, I'm kind of going, wow, there's some things there that I could learn and benefit from, right? Because maybe I have a quick temper. I think most people are like mirrors. Obviously, if somebody comes to you with great generosity and hospitality, you do the same thing. If somebody road rages you, especially guys tend to do, reciprocal things which are idiotic because you don't even know them. It's not even personal necessarily. So I think this kind of teaches you to step back away from all these superficial things you get upset with and try to just see the bigger picture, that there's probably something out there beyond, at least in their minds, there really is. And they're looking forward to it sometimes, they say, which is very interesting to hear someone saying they're almost looking forward to going back to that other side. And it's not just about reuniting, though, often with relatives, which is wishful thinking sometimes. A lot of people, none of us want to die, really, unless you're in serious pain. But none of us normally want to die. So that's been the eternal question throughout time is, how did we get here? What are we doing now? And where are we going? There's three questions. And so what happens after you die? Where are we going? Is the eternal question that a lot of us live in fear with. And so I can learn from them a bit not to have that kind of fear. Although strangely for me, I still feel like I'm immortal, which is very, very odd, because I can see the body decaying over the years, but my spirit is still thinking, this doesn't seem like that's going to happen to me. I don't feel like I'm going to die. I don't feel any medical problems. So I have the illusion that this is going to keep going on in my life, and obviously, intellectually, it's not. So it's interesting to hear their point of view, not to be afraid and let go of any worries that you have, that you're leaving the party and you don't want that party to continue without you. That's often a fear that people have, is they don't want to be the one to leave early. And while people are having a great time in their lives and saying goodbye to loved ones. So it's a reassuring voice you hear from near-death experiencers, a reassuring about not to let that worry you at all. So I try to take in stride, not knowing what the answers are. I don't have any empirical evidence what happens when you die. So.
Can you explain what licensing footage is?
Absolutely. Well, as part of my career, I shoot stock footage. I shoot documentaries, travel adventure programs, and movies. So there's a variety of possible income streams a filmmaker can explore. For me, that's what I've been doing for these decades. So for licensing of stock shots, which I've got so many thousands of stock shots. What you do is you cull through all the footage that you shoot on assignment in a particular country. You kind of edit that down to maybe a top 1,000 shots from all this hours of footage you shot, and then you put it on a reel, a digital file, and then you license it to different companies. National Geographic represents thousands of my shots, action shots, motion shots. I don't shoot stills. You could probably do frame grabs these days from 6K, 8K footage, and they could look great, right? But it's all been motion shots I've licensed over time to different companies. So there's Pond 5, there's so many different companies out there, Getty. And what you do is you sign a contract with them. It can be perpetual. I mean, it can be an automatic renewing thing. You can limit it to 5 years. It's up to you. Usually I just let it go in perpetuity because there's no reason not to if you're getting a check. And then you can try to renegotiate sometimes the terms of your contract or how much you're getting per shot. Stock footage, though, has not been as profitable for me anyway as it was in the 90s, in the early 2000s. And that's because there are just so many more people now shooting really high-res shots with iPhones. And where it used to be the case where you'd have to spend more money for good equipment, good gear that you could not have to compete with so many millions of other people shooting. We're in a selfie generation, so people are shooting reams of shots, and some of these people are now marketing it through Pond 5 for a very small amount of money. Sometimes just $35 a shot. It used to be $1,500 a shot for certain things that you would shoot in different countries that were a little bit more unusual or rarer to shoot. But now it's different. In the last 10 years, I've noticed a decline of income from the stock footage sales. So I don't normally recommend people do that, but it just depends on how aggressive you are at marketing your library and your shots. But you can have as many deals as you want with different companies. You don't have to be exclusive to Nat Geo or to Getty or to any of these others. You can create a whole library of shots, thousands of shots, and offer it to different stock footage libraries.
Did you adopt drone footage right away? I know that's something that's maybe a little more rare than these selfies or...
Yes. Drone footage, as every filmmaker knows, has changed the entire complexion of filmmaking, the entire, let's say, tools in your toolkit that you can bring to your movie. It used to be, of course, when I was starting out early on, it would be shooting from planes, from helicopters, probably not from balloons, but at least helicopters. Now that was very expensive to do. It was $1,500 an hour to shoot from a helicopter or a plane. And then you'd have to have specialized stabilizing gear as well inside the plane. They'd take a door off and you have to go through this entire rigmarole to do this. And so those were very selective shots and you couldn't afford it often for your shows, depends on your budget. But now, of course, drones are just taken for granted. Now they're so cheap to get. Some of them are still very good and still very cheap. So it's a matter of almost I can't really think of any film now that I would want to do or any movie that would not incorporate drone shots, especially if they take place in the international settings where we always shoot, because that's part of what we're doing is trying to transport the viewer and the audience to Egypt, to Thailand, to Zanzibar, to Antarctica, whatever you're doing. You need to bring them in to the general setting. It used to be, called the master shot. Now a master shot could be coming in over Cairo and then coming into the marketplace, going over the pyramids or going, over icebergs in Antarctica. It's just an expected part of your toolkit now to bring those into play. And so, again, depends on the country and their permits. Like I said, Egypt, it's illegal, but most countries you can bring a drone into and shoot. And even in Egypt, you can hire a government-appointed production company to do drone shots for you. It's just more money.
But even here in LA, I think that you couldn't just necessarily go to downtown LA and find a landmark
That's a
and
good point.
do a drone
Yes,
shot.
and that's let's talk about accessibility of drones. And let's say you're going to Europe, or you're going to Paris, and you wanted to get some drone shots. Well, that's not going to be that easy. I think what I was referring to before are usually in desert landscapes, or over rivers, or over certain big geographical sites, mountains, or foothills of mountains, and those sorts of things in the country. That's pretty easy. You can do that. But in most country, except for China, again, we have to have all these caveats. If it's a communist country or something like that, those are very tightly controlled. You can't usually shoot with a drone in a communist country. That's pretty tricky. But a lot of countries, dozens and dozens of them, you can bring in a drone and do that. But yeah, like in downtown LA, or virtually any city in the US, or even a town, there are definitely laws on the books. You can't just fly a drone through downtown LA without special permission. And there's like pilot's license for drones and so on. But again, like a lot of the countries I go to, the laws are a little bit gray. And so sometimes you just take the chance and negotiate when that's if somebody comes up with their hand out.
What types of shots are most marketable if you are to license the footage later on?
Very good question. The sense of what are the most popular shots being licensed? For me, since I only focus on international shots, from the ground, from the sea, drone shots, things like that, that only represents 5 to 10% of the marketplace. 90%, I understand from other filmmaker friends who focus on just doing drone shots and stock footage shots in the US, 90% of the demand is for domestic subject matter, not international. Isn't that interesting? I always thought that would be a higher percentage. There'd be more demand for shots from Rome or wherever, But that's not the case. It has more to do with more practical things, because a lot of times stock shots are used for ads, supplemental shots of people working in offices, or a product they're trying to sell domestically. So they just need more readily recognizable shots for advertising. And if it's for documentaries, sometimes producers want documentary shots of something that they can't easily get. But still, 90% of the shots that you might be shooting, you might as well focus mostly on domestic-based themes. That's where most of the money is, interestingly enough.
That's surprising.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah, I would think that the more unusual shots of other countries would be more popular, but that's not really the case. So I found that to be interesting too.
So the licensing terms you kind of talked about, you said it depends. It can be in perpetuity.
Yes, it can be in perpetuity, right. Or you can just limit it to 5 years or whatever you want to negotiate. Often they're fairly flexible.
Okay.
But they also do, what I didn't mention is they usually want, also with stock footage shots, if you're doing that for part of your income as a filmmaker, you want to be sure you have a sort of provenance line of custody on that model releases. If you're shooting anything to do with people's faces in a crowd or in a market or wherever, in a business setting, wherever you're shooting nationally or internationally, you have to get that model license, have them sign off and pay them $1, whatever it is. It's a nominal thing. Most people don't really care, although sometimes when you bring out a model license, they kind of go, wait a second, are you going to be making a lot of money on this? It almost draws more question to what you're doing. But generally speaking, and actually specifically, you do want to get some kind of model release, photography release from every subject that is seen in the frame for, there's no exact formula for this, but at least if you can recognize a person, essentially that would mean like 2 seconds if they're passing by, you better get their permission. And I've noticed that with stock footage companies now, they're getting much more stringent on requiring permits, not permits, but permission from your subjects. Didn't used to be that way 10, 20, 30 years ago, but now it's more stringent. And even if you photograph, say, the Eiffel Tower with their light show they have every night, that's now copyrighted, that light show, and you can't actually sell a shot of the Eiffel Tower at night without having the permission of whoever designed the light show. Isn't that interesting? But think about how many millions of shots are done by people every year, right, of the Eiffel Tower at night. But it's just becoming, more regimented, I suppose, as far as getting permits and permissions.
Can you talk about the differences between financing your documentary work and the narrative films you're now financing?
Yeah, regarding financing for documentary films versus the narrative feature films, for decades it's been much easier to get the money to make the documentary films and the travel adventure films. They're almost always financed ahead of time, either through grants, but usually through a fairly wealthy person that has some interest in the documentary. That's been very interesting to me. So that's why I've been working through partners like Paul Perry and others that have access to certain investors that had a really keen interest in history topics or near-death experience topics or art and so on. And so they would finance these documentaries. So I didn't have to worry about that. And that was nice. It's obviously, that's the critical thing for filmmaking, is assuming you've got the great story and the talent and the gear, is you need the money. And everybody's looking for money, right? At every level of filmmaking. So for documentaries, I found that always to be more lucrative. I would just set a fee for my services if it's for directing and shooting or one or the other. And so usually I would come in as an associate production company in itself and provide the whole package of directing, assisting with producing, shooting, and editing. So I'd usually present a package of services for a certain amount of money for the documentary, and then that would just be financed through the equity investment, the person that's connected to the documentary. Now for feature films, that's the trick. That's the hardest thing in the world, is to make a successful feature film that gets its money back and profit. I think the percentage is only 5 to 10%, maybe only 5% of independent filmmakers that actually get their money back from a feature film and make any money at all. It's such a tiny percentage. So, and I've found that to be the case even after having decades of experience, track record, things to show people. You still have to go out there and prove it, raise the money somehow through equity financing, private investors. For me, that's the only way we've gone so far. We hope to get into the next echelon of filmmaking where it's $2, $3 million, $4 million, then that becomes something now associated with offers to name actors that then you can reserve their talent and then negotiate with the banks for financing, or then you also can get money from, of course, the rebates from certain countries or states for money you spend in their state or their country. That's very competitive right now, by the way, and we could talk about that more. But generally for feature filmmaking, it seems to be more challenging, absolutely, even with all the ideas and movies we've done already. Every one you start off with and present to an investor. Generally, it's the return on investment sheet that they're interested in. And it's so hard to do that because the distribution model has changed so much, as we know, in the last 20 years. Used to be you could go in and do pre-sales for a feature film, obviously different territories, and you could make money right before you produce the movie on pre-sales, but now it's almost impossible for an independent filmmaker to get pre-sales or to get a minimum guarantee or anything from a distributor unless you have a name actor associated with it and you already have kind of a track record of making money with your features. So for me, it's just a big challenge, to get the funding. It is for almost every filmmaker to do a feature film, unless it's very low level of 50,000 or less. That's an interesting topic too. I don't know if we have time to talk about it, but it has to do with There seems to be now a train of thought with a lot of people that are talking about this, distributors too, that make a movie for $50,000 or less, or make it with your name, actor associated, and it's $1 million, $2 million plus. It seems to be like there's a dangerous landmine area between 50,000 to $1 million, where it's a no man's land, and it's filled with all kinds of possible places where you can be blown up and not get your money back. And that's because of name actors are everything. That's what every distributor at Cannes, at AFM, at Berlin's market, you know, it doesn't matter what you come up with, a story, they say, who's in it is the first question, and who's in your movie? Because they need to get a handle on it. Who are they going to put in the poster, in the trailer, so on and so forth. So, but some distributors are saying, well, make something that is action-y, they use that term, action-y, or horror, genre-based, or something like that, martial arts, something, these genres, right? For 50,000 or less, I think we can definitely make money on that. So it's a very strange model right now in my mind. Why can't you do something in that $500,000 range and get your money back and profit if you're a talented filmmaker? Very challenging right now. Very challenging. Almost, you're fighting the odds so much. Like I said, less than 5% will succeed in that range.
When looking for an investor, how do you know which investor will withstand being able to not get their money back should the opportunity arise?
Right. With the films that we've done, since they're micro-independent features, usually, me included, we go to friends or friends of friends that have the wherewithal to be able to put in money for points. And usually a film is made under an LLC. For each film you have a limited liability company and bank account, and you approach with your sell sheets, with your pitch deck and your track record, and if they're a friend, they already know this already. So you try to get them to buy in for $10,000 for a point, or it might be 2 points of value. If they put 20,000, they get 4 points, or it depends on the structure of your budget. Maybe they get just 2 points. But then, as you've probably heard before, usually almost always the deal is structured where you tell that investor that they're going to get the first money back plus 10% or 20% on top of their investment before the rest of the money is dispersed to the other LLC members. So, but your question again, how do you know which ones are what to say, or which ones are more appropriate? You know, as long as you've got a handful of investors that believe in you and want to be part of this film adventure, because that's what we tell people we're involved with. We're not making this film to get rich. We'd love to be able to strike it rich, but that's so rare, and you don't want to present a blue sky proposal to somebody that's unrealistic. So you have to tell every possible investor that we'll definitely do our best to get that money back, plus some gravy on top of that for you, but your money is completely at risk. So you don't want to go to people that are really already fighting to pay their bills, you know, on a monthly basis. It just would be completely unfair to go to certain relatives or friends that just don't have that cushion of money. So usually, you know, after making a film or two, a movie or two, you already know the people that could lose that money. They could lose 10 or 20,000. No one wants to, but they could, and it wouldn't be a detriment to their lifestyle or health or anything else. But they go into it with their eyes open. Investors often want to come into a movie because they like you, they believe in you, they've been a friend for a long time or a family member. They also want to be associated with the adventure of the film. They believe in the topic sometimes very strongly, if it's a big social theme, climate change. There's so many different topics that you can find people that are very passionate about, and they don't mind not losing it per se, but just saying that, okay, it's going to a good cause. You're going to get this message out in this documentary, or part of your feature film story could be about a social issue too. So they want to be associated with that cause that is a little bit bigger than they are. And that's really the kind of people usually that I've been dealing with over the last many, many years, are people that sometimes if a person puts in a certain amount of money, they want to go on the production itself. And that's a big buzz. The juice is in producing and shooting when you're doing movies. Some people get excited about the editing, but I don't. I don't really like editing, even though I'm very good at it. I don't like it at all because it's inside. And for me, I'm into filmmaking to get out in the world and get my hands a little dirty in these different places and get immersed. And that's, of course, where the buzz is for most filmmakers, is in the production itself and working with actors. And then the editing is something else. It's a tedious process over months. And you learn to almost, this doesn't hit the topic of investment, but you actually, as a filmmaker, you know when the film is done, when you're just so tired of it, seeing it so many times over months, and you almost not hate it, but you learn to almost say, you've taken too much of my time. This film is really good. And the last few weeks of a film, it tends to be diminishing returns. I think most filmmakers will tell you that you get into nitpicking on a certain word in a certain scene or a certain fraction of a second to cut sooner that the audience generally is not going to care about. These last minute little details that you become obsessed with, try not to as a filmmaker. Try to get at least to 95% of what you wanted. You'll never get 100%. Because you always know you could have done something better in retrospect when you watch your movies. Every time I see any film I've ever done, I know all the mistakes, I know all the things that were very good about it. And you always wish that you could go back with more money and time to do certain things again. So you just have to call it quits after a while, like a painter. When does a painter stop painting? How could we tell, on a canvas? They know, though, like filmmakers know. Off topic, but I thought interesting.